Hey everyone, and welcome to our study through the New Testament. We're looking at the four Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and we're studying in chronological order the 250 events in the life of Christ. And today we come across Jesus preaching throughout Galilee. It's a short little section, and then we're going to be looking at Matthew, Mark, and Luke in this area here. And basically, what it covers is Jesus going throughout the region, just kind of summarizes him going throughout the region of Galilee and preaching and teaching, and healing the sick and casting out demons. And that's pretty much what it says. And so we see in Matthew 23 that Jesus developed a powerful preaching ministry and spoke in the synagogues. And most towns that had 10 or more families had some sort of synagogue. And the building served as the synagogues served as a religious gathering place on the Sabbath, and it was a school during the week. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. But the leader of the synagogue wasn't typically a preacher as much as he was, or teacher as much as he was an administrator. And his job was to find and invite rabbis to come and speak. And it was in customary to invite people like Jesus to come and speak. And so I would have kind of place it down with the same. If you live in a rural area when you have like a bunch of small churches and they can't afford to pay a full-time preacher or have a bunch of full-time preachers, then a lot of times they'll invite guest speakers to come and they'll kind of rotate. And it was kind of similar to that kind of style setup we see in a lot of our more rural areas today. In verse 25, of Matthew, it talks about the large crowds following wherever he went, from places like Galilee to the 10 towns. And this was actually in the Greek called Decapolis, and it was a league of 10 Gentile cities on the east side of the Sea of Galilee. And they were joined together for trade and mutual defense. And so there was 10 little towns over there, and he even went to those and went throughout all those. And so the word about Jesus was out, and the Jews and Gentiles were coming long distances to hear him, and they were following him around as he went through all these areas. And so we shift into Mark, and I'm not going to cover Luke because it's just a couple verses and it kind of says exactly what Matthew and Mark does. But the one thing we see in Mark 1, verses 35, it says, before daybreak the next morning, he'd been traveling around, he had been casting out demons the night before, healing the people, healing several people. And this was one of the things I haven't touched on it yet, and I usually touch on when I'm preaching, is the fact Jesus got tired. And the Bible never really goes into the details of it, but it seems to be that healing people, right? The physical act of healing people was draining on him. That it seemed to drain something physically from him from a human perspective. And again, the Bible doesn't go into the details about this, but there are times we see that Jesus, he does get tired. He does have to go and rest. He does have to get away from the crowds. And my only thought is around this is that, there has to be some sort of energy or some sort of something that was coming out of him that drained him as he did this. And so we see in verse 35 of Matthew 1, it says, before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up, went out in an isolated place to pray. And I want to hit on this because it's so easy for us to get caught up in our own ministries. I know, at least for me, I've done this, and maybe some others, that we get so busy, or maybe not just in our ministries, but in our everyday lives and everything, we forget to neglect solitude, right? That individual worship, that individual prayer, going away, getting away by ourselves alone and just talking and worshiping God. We need to make sure that we schedule that time in. The simple fact is, and we see this, and we're going to see this several times throughout the Gospels, Jesus took time to get away from everything and to spend time with his Father, and pray. And so if Jesus has to do that or needs to do that, then we surely need to do that. And so there's 5 things I listed here that we need to do, to especially maybe look at our schedules and see. And that's one, seek the Lord before your busy schedule takes over your thoughts. So maybe it's a good thing in the morning. We all have, maybe get up a little bit earlier, do something there that allows you to either get in this word or to pray. And that's one of the reasons why I try to publish these at 5 o'clock in the morning, is for anyone who, if you're getting up earlier than that, then there's nothing I can do for you. But, but 5 o'clock in the morning, so that way people have time if they want to, just to hopefully help them as they study the word. Number 2, withdraw from noise and demands so you can focus on God, right? You've got to pull away. You've got to draw away, or you're not going to be able to focus on what you're needing, the prayer, the worship, focus on God. It's hard enough if you're like me. I'll start praying, and then I get half a minute in, and then I go down all these little paths, and it's like, oh yeah, I got to get back to what I was doing. I start thinking about all these other things. And so one or three, take the Jesus's attitude of regular communion with the Father. He did that regularly, and if we need to be doing it every day, if we can. Reflect on the priorities Jesus had in his life. This is one of the one things I love about studying the Gospels is, a lot of times the church will focus on Acts and further on, like, well, this is how the church needs to behave. This is what we need to do in the church. But really, I mean, it's something that us Christians need to pay attention to. But one of the things that we truly need to look at, and what I love about the Gospels, is it shows Jesus and how he treated people, how he was with people, especially people who were not Christians or Jews. I'm sorry, religious at the time, and how we should reflect that as with the way we treat people who aren't Christians, but also the way he was with those who claimed to be religious or claimed to be followers of God, but didn't reflect that. And so I think we need to show the priorities that Jesus, we need to reflect those same priorities. Number four, determined to pray on a more regular basis and not just in the time of crisis. Again, we do need to be praying in the time of crisis, but that doesn't need to be the only. We need to be praying daily. We're commanded to pray without ceasing, and we need to follow that up, and we need to make sure that we are continuously making sure that we put in time for our schedule. There's a lot of other things that we plan in there, right? We plan plenty of time to be on our phones. We plan plenty of time to watch TV. We definitely need to set aside time to spend time in the Word and to spend time in prayer to Jesus. And I think those five things can help us out. And like I said already, if prayer was important for Jesus, it must be important for his followers, right? If he has to pray or if he needed to pray, then we definitely need to be. And so we see again that he says in verse 38, they came out looking for him. His disciples come out looking for him. It's like, everyone's looking for you. He's like, we got to go, right? We got to go into these other towns and preach to them. That is why I came. So they traveled throughout that whole region, like I already talked about a little bit in Matthew. And we see Galilee was the entire area of Galilee was in the northernmost region of that area, and it was 60 miles long and 30 miles wide. And it had about 250 towns concentrated in that particular area. And so it was a perfect area for him to start and establish really a lot of his ministry. And we see most of his ministry, a lot of the writings that we see inside the Gospels come from his ministries in Galilee. So again, this is again a little short section of scripture, just kind of covering a little bit of what he did in Galilee. And that is the end of this week. So we'll kick into, I think it's week 6 next week, and I think we've on day 42 or day 43 of this. But I've enjoyed it. I'm enjoying giving these, and I'm learning from it, and I hope you all are learning from it as well. And I ask, as always, please share this with anyone you think would be interested in this, and who it may help. And again, as I always appreciate y'all watching. And if you haven't subscribed, please take the time to subscribe so you get the alerts and the messages when we send these out. And as always, thank you for watching.